Hello and welcome to Jerry's Live. My name is Michaela Westra and I will be your host this evening. Now, today we're going to be talking about a new product that I have fallen in love with. This is the SoHo Urban Artist Woodless Pastel Pencils. And as someone who loves the usability of colored pencils and the blendability of pastels, these are like the perfect combination of those two things. So I've definitely fallen in love with these and I've been using them quite a bit. But I wanted to walk you through how I use them and maybe give you some tips and tricks on using them yourself. But let's go ahead and take a look at this set. So this has 48 colors in here and they are woodless. So that means there's about 40% more pigment than the wood-based pencils. And they are lacquered so that you don't get any of that pastel dust on your fingers. And you can still see the color of that pigment before you even sharpen it, I guess. So the other thing is that these are really good light fastness and they are going to be a semi-hard pastel. So they're not super soft and they're not hard. They're really nice in between. And I'm going to be doing a triptych with these today. I first picked out this beautiful image of this person's eyeball, and I just loved the colors that they had in their eye. So my initial idea was I wanted to find something that went with this, probably something floral that matched those colors. So I really liked those greens and oranges in there. So I was looking for yellow and orange flowers with a green background, and I came across these two, which I love, and they match with her eye so well. But I couldn't decide which one I liked with her more, so it turned into a triptych, and I'm doing both of them. And I just think that this combination of things just felt like it fit so well. So I'm going to be doing 3 pastel drawings with these pastel pencils to create this really nice triptych. And for that, I'm going to be using Pastel Mat today. I really like this paper with these pencils in particular because this has a really nice pastel-y texture. It's kind of sandpapery, so it has a nice grit that holds a lot of layers of these pencils. And this one is going to be their palette number 7. So it has their sanguine red, sand color, beige, and a dark gray. I just really like having more of a neutral, especially with doing a portrait. I like having more of a neutral tone in the background. I did contemplate using a more colorful background or a toned background, but I really wanted these to shine over this, so I went for something a little bit more neutral today. And since I didn't have 6 of the same color, I did 3 of my sketches in the beige and I did 3 more in the sand so I can show you the last detail pieces, because I can't finish 3 drawings in an hour as much as I would love to be Superwoman. I don't think I would be able to do that. So I have a cooking show style, slightly different paper, very similar though. But let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to transfer my images onto my paper. And for that, I use the Sorel transfer paper in white, and it basically comes out as a white pastel. And if I put something down that I'm not a huge fan of, I can always erase it or lighten it if I need to with my kneaded eraser. But so I did that for all 3 of them here, and the great thing about Pastel Mat is they come with glassine interleaving sheets, so I can use this as I draw, and also for when I'm done drawing I can protect my image afterwards. Hold on to these for sure if you get this specific paper. So let me get these all ready. And I'll go ahead and get started. So I think I'm going to start with the portrait, I think. Put these off to the side. And when I start a pastel drawing, I like to start by getting the local colors and the base tones of things, and then I slowly build up those details. So to start off, I'm going to kind of adjust the colors of things. And here's my reference image again. I really like that the paper's already very close to her skin tone. So really, I think all I need to do is lighten up those highlights and warm up those shadows. So I don't have to do too much with her skin tone, which is really nice. But let's start by getting in some shadows. And I'm going to stay in the realm of this color, so this kind of warmish brown, and then I'll kind of go into different poppier colors to adjust that. But this is very close to this warm reflected light under the shadows, so I'm going to start with that. And I don't need to be super precise at this stage. This is going to be like my underpainting layer. I can always adjust. And this goes all the way down. And I love this shadow on her cheek because it is basically red. So I might go in and just grab a bright red and pop that in down here right away. And it kind of blends into that more of a orange color, so I'm just going to pick up my pencil as I go up. Then it gets a little bit darker right under the eyelashes. And then it gets kind of to a purpley red here. And I always like to start with what draws my attention the most, and that vibrant shadow is what really draws my attention. Again, it gets a little bit more purple down here, so I have more of a purpley red. And actually, this color is also underneath her hair here, so I'm going to continue that over here as well. And again, I don't need to be super precise at this stage because I'm going to go in with a blending tool. And blending your pastels is going to be really important, especially if you're layering, because the grit of the paper is going to have like ridges and valleys. Once you put something on there, it's going to stay on the top of that texture. In order to build up, you want to make sure you push that texture into the crevices of your paper so that you can continue to layer up to the texture of the paper. I hope that makes sense. But I'm going to lay down my first initial layers, and then I'm going to blend it into that texture. So I can get a little bit more layerability. And these that I'm using are the SoHo pastel blenders. These are great. They come in two different shapes here. So I have one that I can use on a wide area and one with a point for those smaller areas. And it does come with 10 replacement sponges. So if these get super dirty, or if you're switching to a lighter color and you have a dark color on here, you can swap it out and you have 10 extra pieces in your little box here. Okay, I'm going to try and figure out where my highlight is, and I'm not going to go straight for white. I always like to do something right below my bright whites before I jump into those bright whites. I like to end with those. But I do want to figure out where my highlights are on my face. So I'm just squinting my eyes and lightly building this up. If you put it on there super light, you won't retain a lot of your pencil marks, especially as you blend. But if you put it in a little bit harder, you will. So try to be more purposeful with the direction that you're coloring if you do this. Maybe move along with the curve of her cheek. And this highlight goes to the other side of this shadow here. Continues through the hair, all the way to here. Okay, so now I have a decent area of where I know my lightness is going to be. It's not quite the right color, but that's okay. I can keep adjusting. Have a question?
Yeah, really quick. Is this the pastel mat that you listed in the cart that you're using?
Yes.
Okay. Because we were wondering what size, but it looks like it's a 7 by 9.5 inch.
Yep.
And then the other question we have is how easy are they to sharpen?
Oh, great question. I think they're pretty easy. You can use a pencil sharpener. Since it is a semi-hard pastel, I do recommend having a really sharp blade in your pencil sharpener. So either have like a new pencil sharpener or make sure you're able to replace the blade. Having a sharp blade is going to make it a lot easier. I have a preference of using either a blade or a sanding block. And so I have both of those here. I'll show you how I do that. So the first thing I do is I like to clear the lacquer away from the top of my pencil here. That will make sharpening it a little bit easier. So what I'll do is I'll just place my blade like this and roll it. And then I can take that lacquer right off, and I have plenty of space now. There we go. Plenty of space now to sharpen it back a little bit further. And I like to hold on to my shavings because then I can use it in, especially this process, this step in the process. And I'm actually using the pastel shaper jars. These are the storage jars. They don't have the pastel shaper mesh in here, but I am able to collect my shavings or my dust in here that I can use later. And I will just, you can either hold your blade like this and use your non-dominant thumb to push the blade down the point, or if you want to just hold it separately and sharpen it this way. This is how I prefer to do it, just because I feel like it's more controlled. I know exactly how my point is looking as I go, and I can save all of these shavings for later. And another thing is these pastel shapers come in a set of 6, these storage containers. And since I have obviously more than 6 colors, I kind of condense them in groups. So in this one I have greens, this one I have yellows and oranges, and then this one here was my neutral colors, so some reds, browns, tan, and then I can use this actually now if I wanted to. So since I have all of these colors in here, I have now like a reddish brown collected in here. I can pick that up with my blending sponge I can see what color that is, and if I need to, I can compare it to this to figure out where exactly I could use that. And I feel like this shadow area is perfect. So I'm just going to blend this into the corner. And so none of it goes to waste. We have another question?
Yes, on YouTube we were wondering what is the softness of the pastel compared to like a pit pastel or a carbothello pencil, if you knew what those were.
I know what they are. I haven't had a lot of experience with them, so I don't know if I would be able to say off the top of my head. I think they're similar to the carbothello, is that how you say it? I think they're similar in hardness to that. And I don't know the hardness of the other one you mentioned. But they are semi-hard. Usually that's a pretty universal measurement when it comes to pastels. So if they say whether they're semi-hard or not, you'll be able to tell by that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm trying to be uniform in my blending here, so it's nice and smooth. I'm also going to use this on the side of the nose, I believe. And then this is how I started the entire thing. So I went in with soft layers with the sponge like this, thin layers with laying down the pencil. Since I have 3 of these to go through, I'm going to switch from this to the more completed version of this. I've gotten everything down except for the eyelashes and the eyebrows on this. And again, this is on a slightly different colored paper. This one was a little bit darker. And I did tape the edges. I do want to say I did use Pro Tape. If you tape the edges of your pastels, I think that's a really good tip because you don't want to touch your work once you're done. If you take this tape off, you have a really nice border. That way you can pick it up without touching your work. And it's a really nice way to frame it if you need to. But I basically layered those thin layers up until this, and I went in with just the pencils to get those really fine details. But I do need to fill in her eyebrow and add some eyelashes. I did want to show that. And I don't want to start with black. I know eyelashes are usually black. But looking at this, her pupil is going to be darker than her eyelashes. So I am going to go for a brown. I like this kind of dark brown. I believe I used this in her hair as well, so that works beautifully. And now that I'm a little bit further into the drawing, I do want to make sure I'm using glassine to place down and make sure I'm not ruining anything I've already put down. We have another question?
Yeah, we were wondering about using an electric pencil sharpener, what your thoughts are there.
I know there are some that work really well with pastels. I personally am not a fan of electric sharpeners. But if you do want to use those, they are great, and I would make sure you look out for some that are specifically made for art materials. All right, I'm gonna go in here and add those eyelashes. I think this will kind of pull her together here. And I'm putting very light pressure starting on the end and then slowly pressing down so it gets a little bit thicker as I get to the bottom. And I want to be really light with this and very confident in what I do, because once I lay that eyelash down, it's kind of there. Of course, you can blend it into the skin tone, lighten it up with an eraser if you need to, and try again. But these are going to look really nice if you go in there with a confident stroke and just put it down one at a time. If you need to practice off to the side before you put it on there and get the right curve and motion, that's always a good thing to do as well. And remember that in the center of the eye, these eyelashes are not going to go straight up. They're going to kind of separate, either going to the left or to the right. And the further down you go, the more they're going to swoop to the side. And since I do have some eyelashes in shadow, I might go in with a darker brown or even a little bit of black to darken these eyelashes over here. Also, don't be afraid to overlap your eyelashes. Alright, I'm going to go in. I do have a darker brown. Maybe I'll do that instead of a black. And darken these eyelashes in the shadow. Do the same on the bottom. Got a couple. They're really light over here. I'm going to try and do really light pressure on these ones. They kind of cross together on the bottom. Alright. So those eyelashes are done. I do need to add in some eyebrow hairs. I'm going to use the same browns. And for the eyebrow hairs, at the very front of the eyebrow, they're going to kind of stand up straight and then maybe go to the left a little bit. And as they go from here to the right, they're going to start kind of falling over like dominoes to lay flat. Sometimes they'll kind of start at the top and come in, start at the bottom and come kind of like a point of an arrow. And not everything is going to be confined into this shape. Maybe I have a couple stray hairs coming out underneath. That will give it a little bit more of a natural feel. I'm going to switch over to that darker brown again because this is pretty dark in some areas. And of course, eyebrows are going to have a little bit of color variation. And then I can even go in here and blend this if I need to. And add another layer. I just wanted to get it a little bit darker. Do need to add some hairs over here. Peeking through the hair. Alright. And I think with that I can call this particular one done. With the hair, I just went in and I added streaks of as many colors as I could find in the hair. Made sure I had some variations. I didn't bring everything all the way through, so some of my strokes ended here, and that's where I added some shadow. And then I went in, since it's a little bit out of focus, and I want this to be the focus, and I just blended everything down along that same motion so it kind of faded together, and then I can go back in with those highlights at the end. Everything over here, the shadow, I just built up really slowly, same way I started with, but that's this guy. Maybe I can take the tape off and then I'll switch over to our flowers. Kind of excited to see what it looks like with the paper color. Let's see if I can get that tape off. And I would say if you guys want to try this, You can use the same reference photos if you like. I know I have Amanda and Jillian as our moderators today that they can put the links to those photos. If you see the woman, I would try and find your own flowers. I love the flowers I chose. I feel like the colors in those kind of emulate her eye color really well. But if you want to give yourself a challenge, you can always see if you find something else that reminds you of her eye color. Do you have a question?
Yes, we have two on YouTube. The first one is, do you know if there's a light fast rating on these pencils? And then the second one is just, do you know how similar they are to the Caran d'Ache pastel pencils?
The light fastness, I know we don't have a chart for it, but I do know that all of them have been rated good or well. If I can find a chart, I'll let you guys know. I don't know if we have one or not. The Caran d'Ache pastels, I actually have not played with those. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how they compare. If you want me to, I can always do a little bit of a comparison with other pastels for another show. Just let us know if that's something you're interested in, and we'll put something together for the future. But there's this guy with the tape removed. It's got a really nice border. I don't have to worry about messing up my drawing. I can pick up those edges. It looks really nice. All right, now we're going to, let's do our sunflower. And I did the same thing here, where I started with those kind of overall base color. Since in this one, the paper color is going to be more closely related to the petals and less so everything else, I basically started by just blocking out all of this brown with some green, which I have a nice combination of greens in here. Again, I can always adjust the color if I need to, but I think this is going to be a really good base that I can darken from. And since it is pretty dark, maybe I will just go in with a dark green. I think I used this guy here. And again, start really light. I can build that up. I like going all in one direction in case I do retain some of that mark making. And I did this all around. And then I went in and just blended it in, and I added another layer. And I just built it up really slowly from this. And since I have a little bit more of a bright green from that combination, I'm going to go in with some of this. Skip around where that is so I can have it blend in a little bit. And I will say, if you're doing a large area of just one color like this, if you hold your pencil at an angle like this and you're using a textured paper that feels like sandpaper, like pastel mat, you'll sharpen your pencils as you go if you work that way. So if you start by doing this and you work at a 45-degree angle and then you go into your details, your pencils are already going to be sharp. And I'm not too worried at this point if I'm getting any of this green inside my petals, because once I get to that yellow, I'm going to do less of this blending and more of it just laying it down and leaving it. Pat off some of this dust. And I will say that dust that I had on there was from the actual dust I put on there. These pencils don't create a lot of dust, which is really nice. All right. I'm going to try and not go through and make this look super perfect right now, but I do want to get all of that green all around. And then I'll jump into the flower. And I did kind of lean into more of a Van Gogh style once I got to the end. Because as I was adding the kind of lights in the background, those blurry details, like back here, what I did is I went in with like a lighter green. And I just started by swirling a circle and then slowly picking it up so it blends out. And I would just go in there and blend this into the background. And I did that a couple of times. I would go a little bit lighter with it. Maybe go in with something like this and do the same thing. Slowly blending it out so it doesn't have any crispy edges. But the last layer that I did that, I just really liked the line work that I did for that. So I kind of kept it. And I'll show you that in a little bit. I know the background's not perfect. I would go in there and add another couple of layers so that it's all uniform and I don't see that line work anymore. But I do want to show you what I did inside here. Because with this reference image, I have these petals which are in focus, and then these petals in the front here are out of focus. So I wanted to show the difference of those edges on here. Going to start with my lightest yellow here. And I did kind of mark it out, so I do know that this part here is going to be really light. So starting with that, and I'm not going all the way to the edge, and I'm not creating a really crispy edge either. I'm just kind of blending it up. Same thing I did here, slowly picking it up as I go to the edges so they're a little bit blurry. Do the same thing here. And then I'll go in with a slightly darker shade. And I will outline it. Again, not being super precise, I'm kind of scribbling it around the edges. And then I would do that again. I would get another color that's slightly darker. And I would fill in outside of that. Maybe I go back in with my orange to blend it out a little bit. I'm just not creating any crispy edges at this point. And then I will go in with this guy using the point. I'm just going to start in the center where my lightest yellow is. Just following that shape, slowly bringing it out, blending it into the other colors. Same thing over here. Starting in my lightest color, slowly blending it out into the oranges and the red. So now I have a really soft transition of colors there. And I would do the opposite with these leaves. So instead of being very loose with those edges, I'll go in with the same colors here. At least I hope this is the same color, we'll see. Go in with those light areas, and I'm going to be a little bit more crispy with those edges. So I'm kind of outlining a shape and then coloring it in. And then I'll do the same thing, jump up to a slightly darker color, get up right next to it, and start blending slowly. Some areas I might not even need to blend. Go up in value. Utilizing the point of my pencil to kind of sharpen up those edges a little bit. Gets almost red right next to that yellow over here. So I can blend this if I want to, but I want to create a little bit more separation between my darks and lights. So maybe I'll just blend my darks together, and then I'll use the other side of this to blend my lights together, but leaving that separation so that the lines are just a little bit more crispy with those. Now I did that on this one here, and I didn't finish a couple of the petals down here, so I'm going to go ahead and swap it. I really built up that darkness, and this is what I was talking about with the Van Gogh-like background. I swirled in those lines and highlights instead of blending it. I kind of left it, and I didn't hate it. I can still blend it in if I want to, but right now I kind of love that texture back there. I do need to finish these 3 petals down here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And these ones are kind of transitioning from in focus to out of focus, so I need to be very purposeful with my blending and my edges in this area. Alright, I got a couple of oranges here. I'm going to go with this darker one. And start outlining where I want things to go. And it looks like this is pretty much the same orange that I was using. So I'm going to go a little bit darker. I'm going to grab a red. There's a line down the center of this petal, and it gets really red up next to this shadow. And this might be a petal that I don't blend in. I really like that line work and how it lends towards the texture in the petal. Do want to make sure I cover up any of those sketch lines, if I still have them. Gets really red right here, so I'm going to press down a little bit harder right there. And it actually gets kind of green at the bottom. So I'm just going to grab this green that I used in the background quite a bit, and I'm just going to slightly dust a little bit of that green in the base of that petal. And maybe even in some of this red. Go back to my red, and then right around here is where it gets a little bit fuzzy. So I'm going to be a little bit more loose with the way I shade this in. And then I'm actually going to blend that, just this petal. Alright, and then that would finish off this. If I wanted to really push the contrast down here, I could. There's not a lot down there. Maybe I'll kind of hint at it a little bit and blend it out so there's a little bit more separation in between the petals. But I could call this done. Now I do have one more drawing that I want to get to. I'm going to take the tape off of this and then we'll switch over to the last one. Do you have any more questions while I do that? Sweet.
I think we're all just enjoying watching the process.
I always tuck my tape under so it's easier to work with, but man, getting that unstuck. I just love that sand color with that green. It's so pretty. There we go. And if you ever do this and you get little fingerprint marks, that's what's so great about the kneaded eraser. Especially if it's something you picked up from your drawing, if it's just pastel. You can just tap your eraser on there and pick up any little fingerprints. I don't think there was anything, but you can just tap that on there to remove any fingerprints, and then it's ready to go. Alright, let's do that last flower. I really like this one because it was more of a contrast, where this one was really dark, this one was really light, and it grabbed different colors from the eye. So I have a dark and a light, two different flowers, same color scheme, which is great. And I'll go ahead and do the same thing with this one. I'll just show you how I started it. With this one I have some of that yellow powder. I'm going to go ahead and start by toning my leaves, not my leaves, my petals. I do need a new sponge for this, so I'm just going to slide this off, grab a new one. And this is what they look like in case you were curious. And you can tell the shape difference. One is round, one is pointed. Alright, let's tone those petals. And then I did the same thing with the background, where I toned it all the same color as best I could. And when I show you, I do want to adjust things after looking at all of them finished next to each other, because I worked on them separately. And since I plan on them being shown together or framed together as a triptych, I want to make sure that they work well together as well. off some of that dust. And since this is a little bit of a kind of a weird greenish, minty green gray, I kind of leaned into that minty green for the background. I tried to create a little bit of a gradient too, because it's a little bit lighter here, a little bit darker here. I tried to push it a little bit further. But I did go in with this over the entire background first. And it did end up being a little bit too blue, so I did go over it with another layer of this guy to bring it a little bit more green. It's such a weird color, which on the screen that I'm seeing that you guys see, it looks pretty much gray, but to me it feels very, very green. I don't know. I just thought it was the perfect color that I was seeing in the green highlights in her eye. And I really wanted that to be something that drew you in. And when I'm blending, I like to, especially if I'm blending from the pencil work, if I'm drawing it in at an angle like this, I'm going to make sure that when I blend it, I'm going at a different angle. So I'm blending those lines together instead of going in the same direction. Those lines are going to be a little bit more prominent. So if that's something you want, keep that in mind. Again, I went in with this kind of lime green. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to go in a different direction with my line work, so that as I build this up and I move the direction of blending and drawing, it will create more of a uniform, smooth background. Feels like it's getting pretty close. I can always lighten it more. And since this is very similar to the other things that I've done, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the final piece here. Because I do want to do a little bit of adjusting on this. So this is where it turned out, and I'm not super happy with this. This feels a little bit more poppy and vibrant than I was aiming for. So I do want to try and adjust this to match my other drawings here. So let's go ahead and see them all together. And then I can figure out how I want to adjust it. So here's my triptych right now. I'm really liking these dark greens, and I want to see if I can pull those kind of yellowy greens into the background leaves here, because I like that connection. I do have just a touch of that kind of teal over here that matches over here, but I do still want to lighten this background into something a little bit more neutral. And then maybe I'll pull some of these kind of skin tone colors into the petals, so there's a little bit more of a jump around with that as well. I might do the same into these petals, just so, like I said, your eye jumps across all of them. So with that, I now have a plan. I'm going to start by changing up that background color, and I think for that, I might just go over it with this guy here and just lighten the entire thing. And since it's a little bit of a like light yellowy orange, it should tone down the greens and blues just a little bit back there. And it will lighten it a little bit. And since I kept some of that line work in the sunflower, maybe I'll keep my line work purposeful and keep it on the background of this one as well.
Michaela, I think
Yes.
you talked about this earlier, but can you remind us if these are super dusty pastels?
They are not. Actually, I don't get a lot of dust with these at all. The only time I do get dust is when I sharpen them, and I use that in the drawing. Gonna work around my background leaves here. And like I said, when we're doing background versus foreground, when things are in focus and out of focus, you got to worry about that edge quality. So these in the background, I'm going to try and blur those edges and keep these edges really crispy. So there's a little bit of a separation there as well. Lightening up a little bit. Might go in a little bit harder just at the top. Starting to feel a little bit better. All right, so the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to bring those yellowy greens into the background. So I did use these guys in the sunflower. So I'm going to try and use these in these background leaves as well. I'm going to try and be a little bit more purposeful with where I'm putting these dark colors. Let's move this up a little bit. And since these are in the background, I don't have to be super precise because I'm going to be blending all of this line work in. All right, that's already feeling really nice in comparison to what it was before. I'm already seeing a little bit more of a connection in my mind to the other one. Then I'll go in with that, just gonna tap that with my kneaded eraser. I went a little bit too far there. And I'll go in with that lime green. Alright. I'm going to use this for wherever I see some light green, and actually they kind of glow a little bit with a ring of green on the outside, so maybe I'll give a little bit of a halo to some of these. I do know that these ones up here are pretty light, so I'll just fill those in completely. And then I'll go in and add these to the edges. And then I'll blend everything out, and I think we can call this one done as well. And I might not even need to blend this because, again, I wanted to also create a little bit of that line quality in the background. So if I just create some really nice purposeful line work, I can just keep it as this being the last detail step. I might blend out just the edges of some of these so they feel a little bit more like in the background. But I might keep some of that line work. Yeah, I'm just gonna go in with the tip of this blender guy and then just smooth out the edges of some of these leaves so they feel a little bit more blurry. And then I can call this done. If you have any last minute questions, now's your chance since we are getting basically to the end of the show today. Alright. I think I can call that good. I might add a little bit into the stem later, but let's go ahead and take off the tape, look at everything together, and then we'll finish off the show. If you are doing works like this, there is also a way to finish these. You can either frame it under glass and or use fixative. I recommend the Krylon Fine Art Spray, which I put in the teacher's cart. Have a question?
Yeah, we were wondering if you were planning on blending in the background where you added the lighter color, if you were going to leave it the way you had it.
I think I'm going to leave it just because I really liked the way I did this. If I end up hating it later, I haven't sprayed fixative on it, so I can always blend it later, but I liked that these felt a little bit more painterly than the realistic portrait, and I just liked having a little bit of differentiation. But that's the joy of being an artist, is you can decide what to keep, what to get rid of. You can decide when your art is done. Or maybe it's never done. I had an art teacher say that your art is never finished. It just has stages of pause, I guess. Don't tuck your tape edges unless you want to struggle like me. Okay. Beautiful. And if you're signing your work, this is also a great thing to have. If you're taping off your edges, you can sign your work on that little edge there. Let's go ahead and put these away. I love this metal tin. And the way I wanted to have this is having the lighter flower on the dark side of her face and the dark flower on the lighter side of her face. So it creates a little bit more balance. But now I have a triptych here. I feel pretty happy about it. I might fiddle with them a little bit more later. But I just really love these pastels and I wanted to show you how much I love them, but I guess doing 3 pieces of artwork. So I hope you guys enjoyed. We always love having you guys here. I don't know if I mentioned today's class code is going to be JL395. If you want anything that I was using today, pop that code JL395 in the search bar at JerrysArtarama.com. Pull up everything I use, even a couple extras. So definitely check that out. Also, if you have not heard of our Facebook group, Jerry's Live Facebook group, go ahead and join that. Check out our community of viewers and what they post. If you are not a part of it yet, don't forget that one security question. But that is it for today. Again, thank you guys for coming. Always love seeing you. And we'll see you next week. Emmy will be here, and she's going to be talking about Lucas acrylic mediums. So stay tuned. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.